Are we live? Are we live?
We're
John,
live.
I think we're live.
I think we are, yeah.
Good morning, everybody, to another Wake Up and Deliver episode 14th. My wife was just yelling at me. I was talking to her, but no, I'm focused here. This is the important. If you heard a what in the background, ignore it. Ignore it. Good morning, everybody. John's
Morning. Oh, I guess I'm the only one who can answer. Good morning.
Yeah. Not enough coffee this morning. What a week that we got to talk about, I guess.
You can tell, look at Matt and I's differences. So Matt's got like that little wee mug. It's dropping off. Like I have to go with the Canon because I'm just dying.
This is double espresso. This is like proper coffee, not that drip American stuff. You know, elbows up, I guess.
Elbows up. You know what's funny? I didn't realize. I used to, when I traveled a lot, it was way supported by caffeine and stuff like that. And I would go to Starbucks, get an Americano grande, and then add even more espresso to it. But a grande Americano has like already four shots in it or something insane.
Ooh, all right, let's get started, everybody.
Yes.
We got some interesting. This is the John warm-up.
That is my warm-up, so it's trademarked. I don't want to see anyone stealing that without credit being given.
I don't have enough time. It's not a useful phrase. When it comes to anything related to your dream, it's okay to actively choose to do something or not, but don't blame time.
Yeah, okay. So I do like that one. Have you ever heard of or read the book The War of Art The War of Art? Yeah.
No.
Anyways, it's a pretty it's well regarded, I'll say, book, especially for creatives and stuff like that, and it really talks about like resistance and these types of things. General premise, and this won't ruin the book for you, but the general premise is kind of like the author saying there's always going to be more stuff. Like you can never have enough time for all of the stuff that you could possibly be doing. So pick your poison, just choose what you're going to put it into anyway. So I think that resonates with that quote, right? It's like you have all the time you want, as long as you want to make it a priority.
Exactly. I'd also like to point out to everybody that John's starting to copy my style.
I am.
He enjoys the headset look.
I do.
He has a contrast to mine.
Well, two things. One, I mean, I'm more open to white, especially with the Sony stuff. I was looking at the ZV-10 in white too. That's the camera Matt uses, by the way. He uses the black version. I've got a Canon EOS and stuff that's running this one, but I did switch because I was using my earbuds, which is fine a lot of the time, but honestly, they're fidgety and they constantly like are moving, and it's a pain in the ass. Plus, they have touch controls that, despite Samsung saying you can turn them off, don't turn off. So huge frustration. So I went with these guys because I was at Best Buy over the weekend, which I'll share something with you later about Best Buy. I'll give them a plug since I've been ragging on them lately with other posts.
Let's get started. In light of recent events, tariffs last week coming into effect from the U.S. globally, I don't think everybody knows this. I was kind of surprised how they calculated it, and I thought we should talk about it a little bit. It's quite interesting, to say the least. But everybody's familiar with this right now.
Oh, fuck. Probably this and the action figures are the most popular images on LinkedIn right now.
Action figures.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Okay, maybe I'm behind on stuff. Everybody's familiar with this, and I was surprised how this was calculated when I found out. So we're going to take an example here just so everybody kind of gets it. How is 90% calculated, 90% of tariffs? I read a post I thought was interesting. How they did it. This is the U.S. trade data. Vietnam is right there, as everybody can see here. Let me zoom it in.
Oh, you gotta way zoom it in.
Is that better?
I mean, it's better, but it's like it could be about another 100%. There you go.
Okay, so we got Vietnam here. The U.S. imports 125 billion a year and only exports 11.5. If we take 124. Divide that by, was 11.5?
Sure.
We get 10%, which is 90% that we saw here. And that's how they kind of calculated the tariffs. I don't think that's how tariffs work.
That's totally not how tariffs work. Was it not you who sent me the video? If it wasn't you, I saw it somewhere. And I just started laughing immediately because it's like someone was sharing a similar take. And they're like, the sleuths on Reddit figured this out in about 2 minutes.
Yeah,
or
I think
you sent me that
one.
But it's just hilarious because I do wonder if like people in the White House were like trying to figure it out, or what kind of lipstick on a pig explanation they gave for this thing. some dude on Reddit like cracks the code, in like 2 minutes.
and these are how the tariffs really work. It's usually by commodities. I'm not an expert on how they do work, but every commodity is a little bit different, and every sector is a little bit different. Services are different. Dairy in Canada is a famous one that's different, and there's usually quotas as well. So it's not like it's every 1 liter of milk all of a sudden coming from the United States into Canada gets tariffed. It's after a certain amount that gets tariffed, and the same thing that's reciprocal on the American side. So I wanted to talk about that. That's a little bit misleading because it does affect the global supply chain, as we see this morning across the board.
Oh, for sure. Like every stock index, everybody's losing money. Companies are like imploding on their caps. Here's the thing though, and I will give a very slight fact check and reason of truth when it comes to tariffs. It is true that there are situations where the US or any country, but this is just in the context of the US, has a more favorable import, like for another country to export to the US than to the US to export to them. And I don't just mean because people buy and what they can buy or can't buy. There are most certainly situations where there's like an engineered imbalance, but that was very intentionally and strategically done because, for example, the US in the past, as part of its trade policy, could use things like access to their domestic market for sales, for exports, things like this to benefit another country. But it was done to strengthen alliances, strengthen sort of long-term partnerships and vision. Like it wasn't just like random, like, hey, we'll give you a good deal, and then all of a sudden getting killed. You know what I mean?
Yep. Well, it's what other global powers are doing now. They're building roads and infrastructure by using trade for that aspect of it. It was used the same way, right? So it's kind of, this is this morning's opening bell, I think it was at 8:30. Things are just looking kind of bad, not good. And there's a whole bunch of companies reporting their financials this week too. That are big banks are reporting it. It supposedly is going to be not the greatest week. That's for sure. But on a different note, do you want to talk a little bit more about these tariffs and
not overly. I mean, honestly, I think everyone has tariff fatigue, and there's lots of information, lots of sources, lots of confusion though. So I think at the end of the day, probably just the best message is like, look, focus on your business, and try to take your time, work through it, and do the best you can in your given situation, because your business is unique and will have its own puts and takes. So manage your own house at the moment.
Be educated on it, right? Like if someone says, oh, tariff this or tariff that, understand how they work and why they work the way they do. Like to that point, Nike said, well, I'm not building manufacturing in the United States. I'm just going to keep my factories in Vietnam and just trade with others at this point, because people are still going to buy the brand.
Well, but that's the thing, is that like, and that's a good point. Like different brands and different businesses has way different options. Like when it comes to it, right? Like, Zara with their 60% margins, they got some flexibility in a lot of their choices about what they want to do. Whereas if you're in, other industries that are notoriously lower margin, You know what I mean? You're 10%, 8%, whatever. Like, you don't have the same options as someone that's rolling at like 64% GM.
So that's maybe a good take. Maybe have a look at the companies you're dealing with and look at their margins and their financial reports if they're publicly traded. And if you have someone that's on your books that is low margin and has a lot of imports, it might be a conversation that you have with them going, maybe I should reduce the amount I'm moving with this company at this point because they will be affected. That's a great afterthought.
Well, I'll add one thing. I wasn't going to bring anything up. I had made a comment yesterday on someone's post and I ended up deleting it because I thought it was a little too sharp or whatever, but it was related to logistics service. And I'll put this out there for especially like those mid to small to startup type D2C brands or small retailers. If you have any logistics provider that, comes banging at your door and starts talking about how, their technology, their systems, their this and that, give you access to lower pricing and that you'll be better off using their service. Honestly, like, there couldn't be a bigger pile of BS out there right now, because the reality is most people, especially when you're thinking in warehousing, transportation, and last mile, nobody has any kind of significant proprietary features or software that's making those moves dramatically cheaper. Everybody has their advantages, don't get me wrong, but nobody has got something that differentiates them.
Is the cost.
Exactly. There's a reason
you can't pay someone less for doing an activity once the activity, like, there's a minimum wage, there's a minimum set people will accept, and doesn't matter how efficient you get the fat out, there's a bottom.
Exactly. So it's two things. It's one, please keep that in mind when you're looking at your sort of supply chain and your operations right now. Your warehouse providers, your transportation providers, and your last mile providers, they're not the ones that have a lot of margin in your system, right? You're probably better off looking at things like your overall inventory, like how much you're holding, your MOQs from your manufacturer, how broad or how wide your inventory set is, for example, like, how much of it is your core versus your tail, all of these types of things, versus just thinking that you can go to your provider and say, hey, I used to pay X per package, per pallet, per whatever, I need it to be Y. Because in reality, the margin is just not there. And anyone telling you different is straight up lying. Anyway, that's my PSA for today.
You're not going to find that 30% in your last mile provider, that's for sure.
Exactly.
On that note, this is a topic that we wanted to touch upon. John,
I did like this one. So this was a pretty big announcement by DHL and TEMU that came out, I think, over the weekend or late last week or whatever it is, and they were just talking about sort of deepening their partnership and signing a letter of understanding or a memorandum of understanding, I think they called it. But what I found was interesting is that, here people look at like, Shein and Temu and things like that, and they see these like low cost providers and they think that all of these tariffs or de minimis changes or whatever it is going to shut these guys down. Absolutely not true. And the funny thing is here, this is Temu doing exactly what Walmart is doing exactly what Amazon is doing what Shein is doing what everybody is doing, by essentially expanding out the reach of their brand and their marketplace, because this partnership in particular is very focused on using DHL's logistics services and expertise to support what they call local to local, which means kind of domestic, which everybody thinks Temu is just like shipped from China to wherever. But more and more now, they're allowing local sellers in these different markets, started in the US, it's coming to the EU, or it's in the EU and it's expanding, but allowing local sellers in these markets to list on Temu and to sell to these markets. So they are looking for US to US, Germany to Germany, sort of UK to UK type business. And that's where DHL is going to play a big role for them. But that's important because, one, it continues to strengthen Temu's brand. It continues to keep customers like on the platform. And on top of it, Temu is going to continue to sell on their biggest value proposition, which is low price. So it's interesting to see because, people think these guys are going to go away, but it just shows that they are very, very focused on staying around and growing and in multiple different ways.
It's funny. We've talked about it before in the past where we're like, hey, final mile LTL is a very good niche to be in. But as these tariffs shake loose, a lot of these smaller providers that aren't TEMU, like we talked about, the ones that are on Etsy, they're really getting and taking a hit. Even I think a couple of weeks ago, you talked about one of the people that you were dealing with, that you reached out to, had that specialty product. People like that are getting hit. I think one thing that was a hot commodity for the beginning of the year was LTL. But now we're seeing some. I don't know if you guys can follow, but T-Force, one of the big Canadian brand, big in the US as well. They got a bloody nose from a lot of these. A lot of the LTL carriers are getting a bloody nose on a lot of this. So that might not be the way to go. And I know a lot of guys pivoted that I know that do full truckload to kind of get into a niche that they weren't in before, or we're getting into LTL. Might be a time to reconsider if you're not too deep into it right now, because it's expect a lot of these guys to reduce their rates to get some of that market share back, and they have the ability to take a bloody nose for a little bit to get that volume back where they need it.
Yeah, that CH would be the same, TQ, like all of these big brokerages, right? That have some cash reserves, they have big names, but the reality more than anything else, they're a big machine and you got to keep feeding the machine, right? So they'll do what they have to and slow, kind of weather the storm. And unfortunately, I guess for smaller businesses, these guys or any big business can do it better than a small guy.
Yeah, the truth of the matter, as I would say in my broken English today, is they can run on smaller margin. A company that does 1 million transactions a day, only making $1 off a transaction, will make $1 million a day. While you doing 1 million transactions a year will have a harder time surviving off that $1 a year, right? And that's how these giant corporations will run. They'll have thinner margins. The bigger trucking companies, the economies of scale, will reduce their rates to a point where they will break even or make a little bit of money because they can survive on that aspect a lot better because their costs are so much lower and can corner markets. We've seen that before happen many times. And then others that have tried it that kind of failed and disappeared, right?
And, keep in mind too, that these guys, to your point, they have a bigger book of business, broader customer base. So they have access obviously to certain industries or certain verticals that are much more profitable that, they can use to support some of the activity that's, more commoditized and stuff like that. CH as an example was quite open about the fact that they're looking to continue to grow that dedicated fleet business, those custom solutions, these types of things that, really lock them in, with big shippers for long periods of time. So definitely not great. And, the challenge too, I think on the flip side is the smaller providers, you may see quality impacts on that LTL side, right? LTL notorious for how many sort of like docks and doors that it hits, right? All of the manipulation and movement that a skid or, your product goes through. And if all of these players start, cutting costs, they start trimming what they perceive as fat or whatever to try to get their costs down to help that profitability, what happens to quality and how quickly could it potentially erode?
Yep. And not to be all doom and gloom, there's a lot of hope still in the system. There's a lot of different things that we can be actively looking at and doing. Not to say, I know we were saying, get away from LTL and final mile. If you have a way of doing it effectively and efficiently, not just kind of diversify for the sake of diversifying, you should absolutely look at those things. Talk to your partners, talk to your vendors, see where their needs are. Because as prices become volatile in the market, it becomes an opportunity for people to engage with their customers and see where some gaps are for you to be able to have a deeper understanding. Because I know I'm having conversations with my customers and going, hey, this is my suggestion of what I see from a logistics point of view. This is what you should be doing. and having those candid conversations help you develop a deeper understanding of what's happening with your customer, and then maybe get different freight that you weren't aware that they needed help with at the same time.
Yeah, it definitely. Hey, oh, random. I don't have the post. I should have, but it just hit me now when we're thinking about costs and stuff like this. I'll get your take. I'm going to put you on the spot. I saw a post the other day from someone sharing something that was on the dock allegedly of like one of the bigger providers out there, FTL and LTL type stuff. But I don't know if they see that they showed a board, okay, and it had a different number of pallet positions. And it showed ways to load this trailer based on the number of pallet positions to essentially distribute the load across the trailer. And like, I swear to God, I was like the only person in the comments that was like, okay, there's like, this is why are you doing this? Because there's a lot of other ways to load this trailer. You know what I mean? But it was like, think about like, I have a 53-foot trailer and I'm loading anywhere from 21 to 30 pallets, I think it was, or to something like that. Yeah. And it showed all these different ways to essentially do it over the 53 feet. But I'm like, and I was like, why would you do this? It's a waste of time. And it's like, well, you got to lock it in. I'm like, lots of ways that you can secure a load, but with load bars and like, you know, blockers or whatever. Because honestly, here's what most people don't realize. A standard pallet that's 40 by 48, like CHEP or CPC or something like that, the way it's constructed, a typical forklift or a pallet mover, pallet jack, whatever, can only really go into it one way, right? More like a pallet jack. Forks can go in because they're usually skinny enough. But when you're putting that onto the truck, you can only go on one way. If you want to use a 4-way CHEP pallet, which by the way is significantly less penetration in the market, you can, but then not as many people use them. And then if you're using a standard skid, going in and twisting your trailer and making all of it look pretty is so slow to load and so slow to unload. I really couldn't imagine the benefit versus just using blockers and load bars. Well, let's go. What do you got? Like I you know, maybe my thinking's off, but
even the 40 by 40, at least in produce, we used to do. We put them in sideways to get more room, not straight on, because then you can load 30. If you do them the length,
I'm not talking about like just a straight load. I'm talking about when you get into this thing of like shifting. So I can understand the shifting side to side. You want to balance the weight.
Chimney blocking.
Chimney block. I wish I had it. The ones that were stupid to me was when you were actually twisting the pallets. So you had like, you know, L shapes going in and, you know, you were kind of creating this different way to push the space out to lock the pallets together.
Yeah. Okay. I can see maybe if the weight is, sometimes we have really, really heavy weights, even on standard skids, where you need to spread it out, where you got to go 2 1 2 1 2 1 2 throughout the whole trailer, because you have to distribute the weight a little bit differently, or you have lighter product on the LTL in the front, and then in the back you gotta make it.
I don't disagree, but I'm saying there's other ways that you can still essentially load it straight on, so that you can load it as quickly as possible and pull it off as quickly as possible. Not to mention potentially rearranging the trailer out in the day if you have to. That doesn't create this Jenga situation through the trailer that's so slow to manipulate.
Yeah, there's only like 3 or 4 different ways to really do it, right? You don't have 15.
Oh no, they had one for every amount. I should try to find it, but like
I don't know if I subscribe to that.
I agree. And people were like, "Oh, this is amazing." I'm like,
"What do they say? Is it cap or not cap?"
Oh, when it's fake?
Yeah,
I think it's cap. I don't know. I'm not that cool though.
You got no riz.
Oh wow! I know. I drop this on my kids from time to time. They get shook. Me just saying something.
This is how hip we are on the LinkedIn and the Facebook.
100%. Okay, so that was a random thing. Anyways, my point being with this is that these are all these little things that, you know, no one ever talks about, but directly, you know, improve operations, speak to the speed, the quality, what people can or can't do. And honestly, to me, that board seem more like some kind of vanity thing than anything that was remotely functional. I'm sure there are very specific use cases where it applies and it's beneficial. I most certainly don't think it's a great strategy for general freight.
I would agree.
I feel validated and vindicated. My day is starting off well. I like it. Look, I got Matt blushing. Look at you. So he's shook over there.
I'm shook. Maybe we should get into barn doors versus roll-up doors. Which ones are more efficient?
Oh wow, yeah. That is that not like the biggest debate ever? Like, have you ever actually met a driver? Well, I shouldn't say that. I was gonna say, have you ever met a driver that actually liked barn doors? I think in certain circumstances, people do prefer them because there's a little less that feels like can go wrong with them. But generally speaking, they're not everyone's favorite option.
No, but they're the industry standard, right? Like
cheaper, easier, less R&M. I wonder why.
Yeah, I don't know. The roll-up doors make sense because then you have more security backed in. You can open as you need to. It just makes a lot more sense, right? But you don't see it as prevalently as you do the barn door. Well,
because in all fairness, there's lots of things that can go wrong, especially if you're doing like a lot of general freight, moving stuff around. If you're a type of provider that leaves your trailers at a customer's yard that might have their own shunter or whatever, like you never really have an issue with like a pallet, for example, jamming up the back door with barn doors. But 100% that can happen with a roll-up door, or the rollers break, the spring breaks, and that spring is dangerous AF. And like no one should ever it's like a garage door at your house. It's like it looks like it's Mickey Mouse, but like you should never touch that unless you're highly qualified.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you ever see those off topic a little bit, but do you ever see those FedEx trailers or the UPS trailers? They have like little rolly bowls on the bottom of them, and then you don't have to even get a forklift in them. They can move the skids on its own and rotates them and brings them to the back. Yeah, I want to see if I can get a video.
That's cool. Actually, no, not like the inside or whatever.
They're pretty interesting. I don't know, going back to some old school stuff.
It is. It is interesting when you see like all of these different trailers, the different equipment that people are using. Like, people see trailers on the highway. They see them, making deliveries in the stores. Don't really think about the fact that, the equipment that people are using should be a consideration. Like, the fleet operators, the retailers, whatever, like all of these little things matter. Like when I was doing some stuff for a big retailer that uses blue and yellow in their logo, you had to use very specific equipment and stuff like that just because of how much they ordered and what was going to the stores and things like that. So it's interesting to understand like what it can and can't give you for flexibility and for your strategy, because a smaller trailer or something that doesn't accommodate that as well means that you might be doing more trips, you might be splitting orders, you might be doing all kinds of other things. So it's very interesting.
This is not the video I wanted, but it serves the kind of the purpose.
Okay.
So it's like walking floors. And it pushes the freight to the front.
Yeah, but like those look like they're pure steel panels. So it's like, what is the idea that you just put it close to the end? Like that looks more like a health and safety feature, so that you put it closer to the end of the trailer, and then that just pushes it right to the tail.
Yeah. It does. But I want to find this one that has the freaking floor. Continue, John. Sorry. I need to find it now, because now I'm gonna have
because now Matt's gonna get like a Seinfeld moment. Like we joke about this all the time, like a Costanza, like 2 days later thinking of his comeback, T-Bone.
Okay, I get it. I'll leave it. I'll find it. I'll bring it for next week. I'll find it.
Yeah, there you go. That's a good option. Okay, we're running short on time. So did we have anything else that you wanted to cover, or what?
No. Maybe next week we should do I think some of the review of how the market did, because we were talking about this week. There's some big numbers coming out. Evaluate it and see how that affected freight, because we suspect it's going to be a bad week, but you never know. It could be the right moves and things are moving in the right direction and we were wrong. You do a little bit of 180 for next week. Be like, hey, this is what happened for the last.
Do you know who Scott Galloway is?
Sounds familiar.
So he's like he's on LinkedIn, but he's kind of all over the place. Like he's a marketing professor, oddly enough, at NYU. Author, written some really cool books and stuff like that, like especially about like Amazon and everything. Anyways, he had a post I saw the other day talking about this whole situation in the market, and he goes, it was kind of like, and he's not a fan, obviously, of President Trump, and he was just like, oh, Trump just created the biggest dip for all of his rich friends to get the richest they'll ever be, because they can buy this big dip and then everything's going to go back up.
But I was reading somewhere that right now during this dip, all the quote unquote big money is still pulling out, and they're calling the people who think it's at the dip are only buying right now. So we're going to see a little bit of these little hiccups, but it's not the financial hedge funds and all these that are buying the stocks. It's all these people who think they understand the market are starting to be like, oh, we're down 20%, it's time to buy. I don't know where we're at the bottom yet. I think we got a precipice to still go. We got tomorrow where tariffs are being enacted. We got counter tariffs that are being enacted later in the week from China. There's a lot of things still happening.
The EU, I think, is making an announcement today.
Yeah.
What I thought was interesting, though, is just how like pure widespread it is when you're thinking about like, what's being impacted and why. Like, Shopify was down. And if you think about it, like why? You know what I mean? Because at the end, but it's more like at the end of the day, they provide a commerce platform. Stuff is still going to get sold. And this is really what we've said a few times about a lot of these stocks and like the impact of these companies, like especially when like GXO announced some results and they got hit because they were just being honest about, the market and these operational challenges. The only real reason the stock will go down is because they essentially think that the GMV and the gross market value that Shopify is transacting is going to go down, which means they're going to look like they're, I don't know, maybe they collect commissions, this and that. But like at the end of the day, it's like, imagine a platform that will still continue to essentially be there and maximize as much of its potential as it can, takes a hit because they're like, well, all of the sellers are going to get killed. And because all of them are selling less in aggregate, these guys will make less money. So pull your money. Like it's honestly super stupid. Like when you think about it, because like,
I'll give you a great example. In 1999, I was just watching this too, because I watch all this random stuff. I don't always send you everything, John. Oh. So in 1999, Amazon stock went from like $10 to $1.55.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then Bezos was like, he wasn't scared at all. He said he looked at his numbers, he was profitable, he had a lot of reserve money, everything was going great. He goes, I didn't understand why. I kind of got the bubble burst and everybody was panicking and removing money, but it didn't affect us. He said, he goes, I knew we were healthy. I knew we were moving in the right direction. I knew we were transacting everything correctly. That stock number, it's an outward health check based off of an outward glimpse of the internal workings. Because in the reality is, it was working perfectly fine, and they just doubled down on their own stock, and then look at where they are today. Just because a stock number is going down doesn't necessarily mean they're in jeopardy. Obviously, if they're over leveraged, if they don't have the capital to kind of sustain that reduction, but good companies like Apple, who have a lot of reserves, their market can go down. It doesn't affect the overall health of the company. On the other hand, Tesla being over leveraged might be a problem for their stock to go down.
Yeah, well, because they benefited, let's call it like artificially, you know what I mean? Like, and they turned into just like kind of like the GameStop of COVID, you know what I mean? Yeah. Like just bouncing up. But you brought up like I think, that's a great kind of frame to like close out for today, is focus on what you're doing. Focus on your operations, focus on your execution, focus on your product, focus on the things that you can control. And if you feel that you're selling, by the numbers and your intuition, your business sense and whatever, if you feel that you're selling and doing everything that you can properly, of course you want to be responsible and, trim fat where you can, or maybe get rid of that sloppy that was not too much of an issue before, but, it's having more of an impact now. Of course, do those things. don't just go looking for some next loophole or some next quick fix or whatever, trying to take that diet pill instead of doing the work, because that's where you're going to get into trouble. And if you know that your operations are sound and what you're doing is sound overall for your business, like keep doing it. Like, yeah, that margin is probably going to dip a little bit, but everybody's dipping. Like everybody's having the same challenge, right? So, just don't react too quickly or in haste. Focus on what you're doing properly and you'll come out of it well.
Don't take the Ozempic if you're already working out and being a caloric deficit. It's not going to help. It's going to make things worse in the long run. There is no magic pill, everybody.
Yeah.
There is no magic pill.
Yeah. And
on that
honestly,
note, honestly,
yeah.
Go ahead. Finish.
I was just going to say, the Ozempic's a great metaphor because, I mean, like the amount of people that know what they should do versus then just being like, I want to keep doing all the bad things and just, have a shortcut. Like, just get rid of that thinking and you'll be fine.
Go back to the quote. If there's time for your dream, if you make the time for it, you will get it. It takes time and effort to get where you want.
100%.
That includes your own personal health. On that note, thank you for joining us for another Wake Up and Deliver as we finish off, and join us next week. Same loading time, same loading door.
Oh, same dock. Yeah.
Same dock.